The Joyful Friar podcast is made possible by the generous support of our friends. To support the podcast, please visit nathan-castle.com and donate today. Hello and welcome to this episode of the Joyful Friar podcast. I'm Father Nathan Castle, your host. Today I'm joyful about a rainy day. I live in the Sonoran Desert in Tucson. We were told at the end of the year that we only got 7 inches of rain instead of the 10 that's normal, so we're in a deficit. You never get away from stories in the desert about scarcity of water and climate change and all kind of politics about who gets the water that's available. So it always feels like a bonus when water just falls out of the sky. It seems like a miracle. I grew up in the southeast corner of Texas where it rained a lot, and now I live in the desert. But today is a rainy day where we're supposed to get even hard rain, which we don't get very often. When we do get rain, it's usually kind of a drizzle. And I'm recording this in early January. I learned on the television this morning that we're a month away from the Winter Olympics. That made me think, I know the next story I'd like to tell on the podcast. It's one that goes back to book one, the first in the Afterlife series. That book came out in 2018, so now it's 8 years ago. How could that have happened? But it's the story of a young woman named Cheryl Lynn, who at 24 years old was just living her life and having a lot of fun. She was in college. She told us that she was studying communications because she knew she liked to be around people. She loved the people in the department and the vibe that it had. She wasn't really sure what she was going to do as a career. She was living with her boyfriend. She was very athletic, and then everything fell apart. She told us that, she showed me in a dream that I was her. I was a young woman sitting in the passenger seat of a car. I looked over at the young man who was driving the car. Suddenly, the car went out of control, flipped over, and I woke up. Well, I'm so used to these dreams, even though this one happened 8 years ago, this has been going on in my life for close to 30. So by the time this one arrived, I'd been through many car crashes and other events where people died in a sudden and often violent way. I assumed that she had died because I'm so used to that. Well, she brought the story in a dream, and in the book, I didn't identify my partner. Uh, I will now. Her name was Laura. She died only a year later. Um, Laura was in her mid 70s, I think, when I met her. She had already been a cancer survivor. She helped me get this first book organized. She had written several books. She helped me get this book organized, and she was the prayer partner the day that Cheryl Lynn came through. Um, we're used to the process that the people who come into my dreams are not random. They've been brought to me by their guardian angel, or sometimes they just say, someone brought me here, but they're vetted and they're ready to make a movement from um, a lower therapeutic level to a level where there will be greater freedom because they just don't need uh, the offerings of the level that they're already at. I've many times made comparisons of what we do to being part of a discharge staff in some sort of a medical continuum. Uh, you might not be a picture of health the day that you are leaving the hospital, but you don't need to be there anymore. Somebody on that last day that you're in the hospital uh, inquires about how you'll be cared for in as you go forward. Do you understand your medications? Do you understand your physical therapy? Do you have transportation to your apartment, to your next appointments? Are you going to be well fed? Somebody, sometimes like a social worker, will have that kind of function to make sure that you move from place to place and your healing progresses. I feel like that's what we do. Anyway, this young woman showed up in the dream, and uh, of all the ones that I've had, especially ones that are in the books or that we've since spoken publicly about on this podcast, she was one of the uh, least cooperative, or if not cooperative, at least enthusiastic about being with us. I think she was so fatigued from being with anybody in a kind of helping profession, if you will, that I think she just received coming to us as just one more tedious process. We learned by we go into protected prayer. We never move into this realm without calling on the angels and saints. And if you're unfamiliar with the process that we do, you can read it in the books themselves rather than listening to me try to summarize them on a podcast. We always surround ourselves with the persons of the Christian Trinity, uh, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, which includes Jesus, and Saint Michael the Archangel, our own guardians, Mother Mary, a number of the saints that I have a familiarity with and a friendship with. We make sure that we're good and safe before we go into this realm. And particularly the Holy Spirit, I believe, is the Spirit of truth. So we don't want to be deceived or tricked in any way. And just doing that prayer at the beginning creates a safe space to proceed. Well, Cheryl Lynn entered into it, and I was going to allow my voice to be borrowed. That's the way the system works. I believe it's a gift of prophecy. My voice was given me by God, and I try to use it to God's glory. Um, Try to be helpful. If somebody needs a voice, maybe you advocate for them and speak up for them. In this afterlife sense, sometimes they actually need my physical voice in order to speak aloud to another person here who's going to help them. So that's Sherilyn did move in, but it was with some difficulty. She wasn't completely on board or cooperative. I use that word again. She did cooperate. She was frustrated, and she showed her frustration with us. Anyway, she I'm going to quote her some because I think she's very well spoken when she speaks for herself. Um, she she told us that she was athletic. She was while she was in college, she was doing water aerobics teaching, and that whatever she would have done later would have involved uh, athleticism. She mentioned the Winter Olympics, which is kind of why I'm choosing this story to tell now. She she mentioned those little what she called those 15-year-old girls that weigh 80 pounds that are the figure skaters. They get so much coverage on television when the Winter Olympics are on. Some guy can pick them up and throw them around on skates. And she said she really enjoyed the muscular women, especially the downhill skiers. She particularly liked the ones that she said go flying off that ramp thing, the downhill skiers that she said sometimes they just do it to see how far they can go, how much distance they can get, and that's the competition. Other times she said they do spins and twists, sort of like divers do, and with a degree of difficulty and grace involved before they land again. Anyway, she said had she been able to, she would have liked to have been an Olympic athlete. You got the feeling that whether she ever would have reached that goal or not, she would have been a very athletic, active woman. Well, she told us that she didn't die in the car accident that she drove in a dream, but she said only part of me did. Um, she wasn't with her boyfriend, she was with some other guy, but the boyfriend that she was with left her because he didn't want to have a girlfriend who was paralyzed, because that's what happened. Sherilyn lost the use of her legs. She said they put me through lots and lots of physical therapy, and she said the physical therapists are always chirpy and cheerful. They're always cheerleading and encouraging you and showing you, how much better you're getting. And she said it could be annoying, but on the other hand, she saw that what they were saying was true. She did see some improvement. but she never was able to walk again. That wheelchair was just about part of her body for the rest of her life. That was very frustrating to her. She said one of the consequences of that was not being able to move yourself without someone else being in charge of you. That included being uh, transported because she relied on a dial-a-ride van to get her where she needed to be. Well, then she told us this. 10 years after her initial accident, after 10 years of physical therapy and life in a wheelchair and relying on dial-a-ride to get her from place to place, she said that you just had to wait. There's a lot of waiting that goes on when you can't move yourself as you'd like. You move on other people's schedules. You dial up the ride and they come late. Whatever she said, what happened is on the last day of her life in this body on this earth, the dial-a-ride driver picked her up and was operating the platform, the wheelchair lift on the back of the van that would put her and her wheelchair into the back of the van, and something went wrong. She said, I don't know if it was an operator error or mechanical error, but what happened was she flipped over backwards and hit the ground in a way that killed her. Isn't that awful? She was only 34 by that time, and she had had two huge traumas to her body. The second one killed her. Well, apparently she arrived in her afterlife already exhausted from a decade of feeling like she couldn't move freely. And she essentially brought that attitude with her. She was no longer in that broken body that required a wheelchair, but her spirit had been deeply wounded, and she didn't feel like she was very mobile or able to do much that she was excited about. When she did come our way, uh, and we got involved talking with her, she said, "Oh my God, not afterlife physical therapy." And my partner said, "Well, it's not really very arduous. It's really quite simple. All we help you do is move from place to place, but you're not going to be needing this kind of service much longer. You're going to be able to move quite freely once you've done what you do today." Well, she didn't mind that. Um, So she said, "Is that all it is?" And we said, "Well, pretty much. All you really need to do is is think of someone who has died already, who you would trust to be your escort, your guide from where you are now to where you can be next, which will be a place with lots more opportunity and joy than where you are now." She said, "Okay, I get it." She was still a little testy, uh, but she said, "Okay, I get it." And then she tried to summarize and rephrase and say, "Now you're telling me that it has to be somebody that's died already, and you're suggesting that I pick someone who I knew, who I would trust to help me move." And my partner, Laura, said, "Yes, that's all it is." And she said, "Well, then I don't need to think any longer. It would be Estelle." Estelle. So naturally, my partner said, "Well, tell us about Estelle." Well, it turns out that Estelle was a physical therapist, but Cheryl Lynn said she wasn't like the rest of them. The rest of them would come in with a chart and a book, and they did everything according to the plan. And they would put you through a bunch of exercises, most of which were boring and laborious. She said Estelle was completely different. Estelle would come into the room where we were, and she would waltz into it like she was in a play. She'd have us close our eyes, and then she'd tell us to imagine our bodies moving in these particular ways. And then she'd have us do follow her direction. And we would uh, close our eyes to crutches and wheelchairs and all of the surroundings of brokenness and just move in our imaginations the way that she was suggesting we could. She said, Estelle made the whole thing feel like art. And the time always passed really quickly when Estelle was working with us. Well, my partner said, "You do remember that she has to have died." And Sherilyn was kind of touchy. She said, "Yeah, I got that." Uh, well, here's the next part. One day, Estelle came into the room and she led with news about her health. She told us that she had had a pretty dire medical diagnosis, a late stage cancer that would not be survivable. She told us that she would keep us updated uh, about the progress of her disease and what she was feeling. She kept coming in and making her appointments, and we could watch her get weaker each time, but she was inspiring because she was doing what she was encouraging us to do. She was pushing through medical issues and disabilities, and she said she was doing the best she could with what she had, which was what she was always encouraging us to do, and to push our bodies to maximize whatever they were capable of doing. Eventually, Estelle wasn't capable of coming in any longer, and then she died. But she said, if you're asking me to suggest a name of someone who could help me move, that's all Estelle ever did in my life. That's all she ever did was try to help me move. So if that's what I need, then I want Estelle. So my partner said, well, that's great. You understand that we don't summon, we can't command that someone be here. We simply ask, but we'll ask right now if Estelle is available and whether she would come to help you move from place to place. That simple. So we got still. And in my own heart of hearts, I still have Cheryl Lynn inside me because she was welcome to use my voice. We overlap. I'm conscious. So I just, said a little prayer inside myself quietly, God, could we please have Estelle? Well, then there she was, just that simple. Seconds later, she did. Sherilyn said, "Well, you always did make an entrance." She told us that Estelle showed up as something like a 24-year-old. Now, Sherilyn had never known her at that age. I think Estelle was 10 to 15 years older than Cheryl Lynn was. But when she manifested, she showed up as about a 24-year-old, which was the age that Cheryl Lynn was when she was in her car accident that caused her paralysis. So that was interesting in that I've seen this again and again, that how our physical bodies work, and there is a physics of a body. Cheryl Lynn was interested in, she said, I know that Christians believe in some sort of afterlife body, some glorified body or something. And she said, I don't really know about that, but I have some sort of body, and and it's not inside time anymore. And so you're not having to follow the rules of how old your body is because it's outside of time anyway. So she didn't spend much time on that because they were busy moving. So off they went. Well, that's so our job was done. When it came time to write the first of these afterlife books, I had in the subtitle Helping Stuck Souls Cross Over, because at the time that was significant in the way I thought about this work, that sometimes people were stuck in some sort of frustrating thought pattern or way of being. It's really what I've witnessed as being a pastoral counselor in priestly ministry over my career, that a lot of people who asked to speak with a priest and sought me out brought a problem in which they felt stuck. If it was a problem that they could figure it out on their own, they didn't need my help. But they would come oftentimes feeling like they were optionless. Sometimes people seek out counseling and they see a few potential courses of action and they want another point of view, a second opinion you might get from a doctor or just wise counsel from somebody you think you would like to hear from and have them help form your thinking. That's one thing. But another thing is when people feel at the end of their rope, they've tried everything and nothing's working. And sometimes, as on the receiving end of that, as a counselor, it could be frustrating for me because sometimes people will come in with a kind of a self-defeating attitude. Um, and you can suggest things, and their first impulse would be to shoot them down and say, I tried that and it didn't work. But if you stay with it, I would just challenge people sometimes to say, if you really don't want to do any of the things I suggest, then we probably don't need to meet. Um, but I hate to see you in pain and struggling. Let's see if we might try something different than what you're already doing. Well, um, Cheryl Lynn had some of that going on, but then Estelle changed everything. Estelle was nothing but graciousness and helpfulness, and um, somehow every other thing that didn't work in Cheryl Lynn's life, Estelle stood out. So Estelle and they, uh, went off, and we were done. When it came time to write the book, we did use this phrase "stuck" or the word "stuck" souls in it, and I think Cheryl Lynn qualified. Later, we got rid of, in the second book, we got rid of the word stuck because I've learned that many of the people weren't so much stuck as they were um, somehow their afterlife was interrupted because of a trauma, but they moved through the trauma and they got to our little place because they were ready to move. We didn't really need to do anything to get them unstuck. We just needed to help them out the door. Anyway, we never tell any of these stories in a book or now on a podcast unless we go back one more time and ask their permission. I don't chat up people who have died. Um, I believe this is a sacred work, but there's always the next person to help. We don't spend a lot of time being curious about things that are not necessary for us to know. We're just doing our jobs. But we did go back into prayer and ask Cheryl Lynn if she would be willing to allow us to share her story with others because we thought it might be helpful. Well, we found out when we did that she was still herself, and she still had a little testiness, and she wasn't a religious person to begin with, and um, she didn't want her story told in religious terms, which is okay by me. I believe God made everybody, and that there's a lot of different kind of people on this earth and and in the afterlife. But she did, we asked her naturally, like, what have you been doing? What's new? And she said, well, here you don't have to choose one thing and apply yourself to doing it. She didn't need to have a career and make money. She said, mostly what I've been doing is moving because for so long I couldn't. And she said, there's not time anymore, so no one's telling you should have stopped doing that by now. I just moved because I can move. She said, I was 24 at the time of my accident. 10 years later, I died in that second accident. But now I'm something like 24 going on 10. All I really want to do is do cartwheels on the lawn. So she was just moving for the fun of moving. She said, I really admired all those Olympians who got up so early in the morning to go to their training and put their bodies through lots of arduous physical activities so they could get better at their craft, at their sport. Uh, she particularly liked the idea that people didn't find that drudgery, that they found it the thing that motivated them to get out of bed and get on with it. And she said, I'm like that. I want to move and move and move. And right now, until now, I haven't felt there's nobody judging me and telling me that I should stop that. She said, I'm really liking that about being here, that there's nobody here scolding anybody else or telling them what they ought to be doing. She said, everybody's just free to do as they please, and everybody's happy because they're doing what they want to do. Um, Anyway, um, in her little afterlife time, she just said, "I might not be your idea of what somebody in the afterlife ought to be doing, but you asked." Uh, so I want to quote her just a little bit. She said, "Whatever people think about what it might like to be outside your body, I don't know about the religion part of it, about some ultimate religion body or something. Uh, it's just that I've got something that's like a body, and it's not the same. It's not the same as it was on Earth, but everybody still has something like a body, and you can be more or less active than normal. I think because I couldn't be very active for so long, I probably am still making up for lost time. And I'm probably more physically active than a lot of the other people around me." She just, again, spoke about movement. Um, um, she said, "I feel like I'm an Olympic athlete who just trains all the time, that loves to train because they want to get better. They want to enjoy being in the gym or doing whatever it is they do. I admire those people who have to get up very early and lace on their skates or their skis or whatever. I'm just very, very busy being physical because I can." Um, well, we were grateful that she was in the course of giving us permission to use her story. She told us that we told her we were thinking of writing a book, and she said that's so ironic because um, I didn't read unless I had to. And she said, once I realized that I wasn't going to walk again, I thought, well, maybe that's an alternative me. Maybe I'll become this great reader since I have all this time to sit. And she said she tried it and she said it just didn't take. It wasn't my way. Even though I had to do a lot more sitting than I ever wanted to, but sitting and reading a book, nope, not me. Um, anyway, she said this poor man, she's referring to me, Nathan, is getting tired. And so I'm going to go now. But I know you're working on a book. And even though I wasn't much of a reader, sure, go ahead and put my story in your book. So we did that. So that's her story. Next time we'll go into the next podcast with the same story, but we'll be looking at it through the lens of what we call compassionate response. Compassion means to suffer with. In the years that this story has been in the public forum, because we did put it in a book, what kind of responses have we gotten to it? What might you contribute if you've just heard about it by listening to this podcast? What did it evoke in me? Uh, in terms of feeling the um, compassion moving from me toward Cheryl Lynn and others perhaps like her. Then after that, the next part of this trilogy will be spiritual practice. Is there some spiritual practice that comes to mind, especially through me, through my Catholic Christian tradition, some spiritual practice that might be advisable, that might spring from this story and might be something that you can include in your own spiritual life? That's it for this podcast. Remember that I I love you whether I've met you or not. I have a place in my heart and in my prayer life for all who listen to or view this podcast. When I pray for you, I pray for the mystery of your whole body, mind, or spirit, and anywhere inside you where there might be the root cause or um, th- the the place where something resides in you that steals your joy or takes the edge off it. Could there be a place in you that might heal because, in part, because I pray for you and ask the Lord to make that happen? That's a standard thing that I do on a regular basis, and I'm including you. If you'd like to be in touch with me, the best way to do that is to go through the website, which is nathan-castle.com. There's a drop-down thing that where you can send an email. It includes fields for saying where you live and a telephone number if you want to leave one. I particularly like to know where you live because I want to know if I try to text you, I don't want to do that in the middle of the night. And because the internet goes all over the world, people can be just about any place. And so that's helpful to know where you live. And I prefer to at least text. I do ask that if you want me to be in touch with you, that you've at least read one of the books first, because sometimes people want to ask questions about things that they could easily have learned by reading at least the first book. They're easily available. They're inexpensive. They're on Amazon, and they're in three forms. They're either a paper book, an e-reader book, or an Audible that you can listen to. And I and my pro partners voiced all of the books. So that's it for this time. Um, Please join me again next time for the next episode of the Joyful Friar podcast. God bless you. Bye bye. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Joyful Friar. Please like, follow, and subscribe. You can visit me at nathan-castle.com. Send me a message by clicking the contact button. God bless. Have you ever had to do something so difficult that you had to deal with it in stages? Imagine dying suddenly with no forewarning, being in a car crash, a shooting, a drowning. You leave your body, but then what? How do you transition into the afterlife? For some, it flows all at once, but not for everybody. For some, the process of transitioning into the afterlife is interrupted. Maybe there's a need for rest or for learning, or maybe just the chance to adjust to such an abrupt experience. I'm Father Nathan Castle. I'm a Catholic priest. About 23 years ago, the Holy Spirit began to send me people who had died traumatically. They entered my dreams during sleep, showing me what had happened to them and asking for help. They had died and moved on, sort of, but they'd come to a moment where it was time to complete the crossing. With the help of the angels and saints and earthly prayer partners, we've assisted more than 300 souls as they complete their crossing. You can read about it in my book series. Afterlife Interrupted books are available on Amazon. You can also learn more by visiting my website, nathan-castle.com. God bless you.